Hill. U.S. Congressman Steve Israel is a Democrat from New York, and Dan Lungren is a Republican from California. Well, I'm rather hyped up by this because I love constitutional law, gentlemen, and I love the courts sometimes telling the Congress they're off base. Congressman Israel, do you believe it's legal, constitutional, proper for the U.S. Congress to tax somebody, to punish them into submission with a 90% tax cut or tax rate on something they did before the law was passed?
We are not taxing people to punish them. We are taxing people to get the money back. The only way that we're going to recover that money for the taxpayer is through the tax code. Chris, you can't legislate it back. You can't debate it back. You can't wish it back. The only way that we can get that money back is by using the tax code. It is absolutely constitutional.
You took an oath to the Constitution. You believe this is constitutional?
Absolutely. I took an oath to the Constitution, and nothing is more important to me.
To punish somebody for something they did before the law was passed.
Not only are we not punishing people.
You're not? A 90% tax is a punishment.
We're using the tax code to recover that money for the taxpayer. And we're doing it in the present year. We're not doing this retroactively. We're using this year's tax code to recover money that is being dispersed this year.
Okay.
No retroactivity.
Would you stay in office if this was declared unconstitutional? Would you admit that you broke the Constitution?
I'm not breaking the Constitution.
No, if the Supreme Court declared this unconstitutional,
no court has ever ruled that taxes are a taking.
Okay. Even 90%?
Correct.
Okay, I've begun the campaign here. Mr. Lungren, you're witness.
Well, Chris, look, I think it's outrageous, these bonuses and so forth. There are legal ways for us to proceed. We started to do that in Judiciary Committee yesterday by applying bankruptcy law to this circumstance, which we think could be done. You can put conditions on any additional funds to be taken by AIG, and they do need additional funds. There are legal ways of doing it. What we did today was the precise definition of a bill of attainder that is prohibited by the Constitution. You cannot punish an individual or an easily ascertainable group of people without a trial. In other words, our founding fathers wanted to make sure that we couldn't have legislative punishment. And that is a question of the balance of powers. It's a question of protecting people from a Congress that made a mistake, that just a couple of weeks ago passed a provision that said they were protecting these bonuses, if people will recall, by looking at that in the stimulus. And now when those who voted for it hear about how folks back home don't like it, they're willing to shred the Constitution in order to look good. I did not take my oath of office to shred the Constitution. I took my oath of office to protect the Constitution. And all you had to do was listen to the rhetoric on the floor. This is supposed to punish. That is exactly what they were talking about. We can't do it. Why not spend a couple of weeks figuring out how we can get the money back? And there are at least a couple of ways that will not violate the Constitution. It ought to be worth that much of our time. We didn't need to leave here today. We could have stayed today, tomorrow,
Why did half your party vote for what your leader called a joke? Half your party, 85 members of the House who are Republicans, voted for what John Boehner, your leader, called just on TV a second ago a joke. I think he also called it a circus. Why did half your people vote for either a joke or a circus?
You got to ask.
What you say is unconstitutional. This is worse.
You got to ask them why they did it, Chris. All I can tell you is, in my heart, I believe it is unconstitutional.
Okay, let's take a look at some of the voices on the floor. Okay. I want Congressman Israel, who's sitting right in front of me. He's done me the courtesy of coming here. I want you to respond to these. Just pick up on what these Republicans have to say right now. Go at it when they come back. Here they are.
And now you're saying if we don't vote for this cover-up that you're coming up with, we're the bad guys. We're not. The American people won't be fooled by this.
It's a transparent attempt to divert attention away from the fact that Democrats in Congress and this administration made these bonus payments possible.
Title 7, Section 111, subparagraph 3, three little i's. And somehow, when the bill left the Senate, it had the white and snow language that said no executive compensation, and it taxed it. When the bill comes out of the conference committee, it has this paragraph in it that makes possible the bonuses that people are so shocked about today.
Congressman, your party has the majority, and you passed a stimulus bill which basically protected these bonuses. How do you explain that?
Well,
now you're going after them, taxing them in this circus here.
Let me tell you what. If people in politics and government are going to take credit for when things go right, we ought to take responsibility for when things went wrong. Something went wrong here. I'm happy to take some responsibility.
You're a member of Congress. Can you find out what happened in conference?
But I don't want to.
You know who
absolutely,
did it?
we ought
Chris
to do
Dodd
it.
said he was pressured by the Justice Department to do it.
I don't know why Chris Dodd did it. He was wrong for doing it. I'll be the first person to say it. But look, when something breaks and you bring it back to the store to get your money back, you don't stand there saying, I want an investigation of why this broke. You say, I want my money back. That's what we've done. Now, let me just say one other thing, because I take umbrage. When people who spent 8 years defying our Constitution, saying it was okay to torture, okay to spy on innocent Americans, okay to surrender all of our freedoms, suddenly say that they're now in contention to become the president of the Capitol Hill chapter of the ACLU, that's fundamentally wrong and absolutely hypocritical.
Hey, Chris, wait a second.
So two wrongs make a right.
I don't appreciate
No, I'm just saying these people are suddenly saying that they're the guardians of the Constitution.
Wait a minute. I was the Attorney General of California. No one ever suggested I tried to tear up the Constitution. So don't get off on that. I wasn't here for 8 years. I'll gladly defend my vote. Don't try and divert attention on what we're talking about. You have supported something which specifically is prohibited by the Constitution. It's called a bill of attainder. You may not like what they did. You may want to punish them. I want to punish them. We're not allowed to do that under the Constitution. We can get this money back in other ways that are legal and constitutional. If it's such a big deal, why did we have to pass it with just an hour of debate and then run off back home?
Where was the alternative? You guys have said no.
I presented it. We focus on one thing at a time. Are you willing to bet this is constitutional? Because Congressman Lungren says it's not. I believe it's not constitutional because I remember my high school civics book. I was an Attorney General of California. I'm not an attorney, but I remember what we all learned in civics. You can't have a bill of attainder. You can't have an ex post facto bill. The purpose of your legislature is not to find somebody you don't like and passing some confiscatory tax against them and say that's not punishment. A 90% tax bill.
We passed an alternative. We passed an alternative out of the Judiciary Committee yesterday with Republican and Democratic support. There is an alternative there. There's also a separate Republican alternative which conditions all future payments to AIG on the fact that they get the money back from the employees and return that to the government. There are two ways to deal with
this. The Judiciary Committee passed a bankruptcy measure, and we'll look at that bankruptcy measure. But the fact of the matter is that there are firms that took taxpayer money and converted that money into big bonuses for people who took that money and ran. You cannot legislate the bonuses back. You can't debate the bonuses back. You can't even have a constitutional argument on the bonuses.
Mr. Israel,
you can only tax
why didn't you tax 100%? Just admit what you're doing. Why 90%?
We're trying to. The Senate had numbers at 90%, and we're trying to come to some agreement and consensus with the Senate.
You think the Senate will go along with this?
I sure hope they will.
You think they will?
Well, we made an offer, and we put it at numbers that they had suggested. There's no reason for them not to.
Mr. Lungren, Congressman, do you think the Senate, which has 6 years to deliberate these things, would agree to what you believe is unconstitutional? Will they do this in the same rush of sentiment we saw on the House floor today?
I hope not, and I hope they will not be stamping their feet, the dirt on their feet on the Constitution as they run away from this issue. We ought to face this issue fairly. This Congress, on the Democratic side, bringing us this bill, did the wrong thing protecting these bonuses just a few weeks ago.
Right.
Let's face up to the fact that let's just face up to the fact that we made a huge mistake. The Congress did. Yeah. The administration has not been as vigilant as it should be. Let's all of us agree on that, and then try and at least follow the Constitution.
Okay, I'm going back to my thought, which is pre-intellectual. I keep thinking of those villagers in the original Frankenstein movie, all with their torches, coming down from the town, all with the torches, looking for the bad guy, and the bad guy's at AIG, and they're just saying, tax them at 90%. That is a bill of attainder, but thank you, Congressman Israel, for coming here, which is always a sign of great respect for Hardball, and we usually root for the guy that shows up here, but this time I'm with Dan Lungren. Mr. Attorney General, you're right. Coming up, President Obama's back